A classified phone directory vanishes from one of Moscow's most sensitive research institutes. Employees joke that supernatural forces must have taken it. They have no idea how close to the truth they actually are. The year is 1986. Cold War tensions are reaching a breaking point as Soviet and American negotiators sit across from each other, discussing the fate of nuclear missiles aimed at each other's heartlands. Every word spoken in those rooms could determine whether millions live or perish. Every leaked detail could shift the balance of global power. But somewhere in Moscow, someone is watching. Someone is listening. Someone with access to the very conversations that could change everything. What happens when a respected scientist approaches the American Defense Secretary at a diplomatic reception and casually asks to become a spy? What drives a man to risk everything for a cause he may not even believe in? And why would anyone steal a phone book when the stakes involve nuclear annihilation? This is the story of Agent Medium, a man who fooled both superpowers and nearly sparked an international crisis with nothing more than invisible ink and a dirty glove. Don't forget to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. You are not here by accident. Spring, 1986. The Institute for USA and Canada Studies sits quietly in Moscow, its researchers buried in analysis of America's latest political moves. On the surface, it appears to be just another academic facility. But this institute holds something far more valuable than research papers. In the director's office stands a telephone unlike any other, ivory-colored, bearing the Soviet coat of arms on its rotary dial. This is a vertushka, a direct line to the highest levels of Soviet power. The phone directory that accompanies it contains numbers that could reach anyone from ministers to the General Secretary himself. Then one morning, the directory is gone. Security protocols demand that such materials be signed out and returned under strict supervision. But there are no signatures, no records, no witnesses. The classified booklet has simply evaporated, as if it never existed. Staff members nervously joke about paranormal intervention. They call it the work of a medium, someone who supposedly communicates with spirits of the departed. None of them realize that their joke contains a fragment of terrifying truth. Because somewhere in the shadows of Moscow, there really is someone called Medium, and he's very much alive. Months earlier, Soviet counterintelligence had intercepted something that made their blood run cold. Hidden between the innocent lines of a tourist postcard, written in special invisible ink, were columns of encrypted numbers. The message was heading from Moscow to an address in the West. The few words they managed to decode revealed enough. An American operative was working inside the Soviet Union, transmitting secrets about the most sensitive topic of the era, nuclear missile negotiations. The KGB launched Operation Splinter. Teams of investigators began the painstaking process of examining thousands of personnel files from research institutes, design bureaus, and military organizations. They were searching for a needle in a haystack, guided only by handwriting analysis from the intercepted message. Sergei Terehov, a veteran counterintelligence officer, later described the operation as titanic work. Day after day, investigators combed through endless documents, looking for any detail that might match their mysterious correspondent. The investigation stretched on for years with no breakthrough. But in 1985, everything changed. A Soviet asset inside the CIA provided a crucial tip. Someone at the Institute for USA and Canada Studies had been in America, someone who fit the profile of their phantom operative. The circle of suspects suddenly narrowed to a handful of individuals. Vladimir Potashov seemed like an unlikely candidate for espionage. Born in 1949, he had graduated from the prestigious Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology, and worked his way up to senior researcher at the Institute for USA and Canada Studies. His colleagues knew him as intelligent but flamboyant. He wore fashionable ties and suits brought back from trips abroad, genuine American jeans, and in winter, an expensive sheepskin coat with a white mink hat. He drove his own car, a significant luxury in Soviet society, and lived in a comfortable apartment with his wife. Potashov had a reputation as something of a playboy and storyteller. During a trip to Tallinn, he had famously convinced bar security that he was an important Moscow official by showing his institute credentials and implying connections to organizations that monitored all foreigners in the USSR. The ruse worked perfectly, allowing him and his companions to skip the usual cues. But beneath the charming exterior, contradictions were emerging. His lifestyle seemed increasingly lavish for someone on a researcher's salary. His marriage was troubled. He had been involved in 2 car accidents after drinking. And most intriguingly, his behavior had changed noticeably after his return from America. Was this simply the conduct of an ambitious academic enjoying the perks of his position, or was something far more sinister unfolding? 1977. Deputy Defense Secretary Harold Brown arrives in Moscow for high-level discussions. The Soviets assign Vladimir Potashov as his translator, a logical choice, given Potashov's expertise in military political analysis and fluent English. Brown is impressed by his translator's abilities. Learning that Potashov is working on his doctoral dissertation, the American official extends an invitation that will change everything. Would he like to visit the United States to gather research materials? In 1981, Potashov spends several months in America. He meets with Brown, now Secretary of Defense. He attends conferences, conducts interviews, and builds relationships with American officials and scholars. But during one diplomatic reception, something extraordinary happens. Something so unprecedented in the world of espionage that it defies all conventional wisdom about how intelligence operations work. Potashov approaches Secretary Brown directly. In full view of other diplomats and officials, he makes a request that leaves the American speechless. Could Brown introduce him to someone from the intelligence services? He wants to work for the United States. The audacity is breathtaking. Seasoned intelligence professionals spend months or years carefully cultivating potential assets. They use subtle psychological manipulation, gradual compromise, and elaborate cover stories. They certainly don't recruit sources at cocktail parties in front of witnesses. Yet here is a Soviet scientist, openly advertising his services to one of America's highest-ranking defense officials. Brown, recovering from his shock, reports the unusual encounter to the FBI. Within weeks, agents make contact with Potashov. He claims to have access to highly classified information about Soviet military capabilities and nuclear strategy. The Americans are skeptical but intrigued. Any source inside such a prestigious research institute could potentially provide valuable intelligence. They decide to test his claims, and if verified, bring him into their network. Potashov undergoes training in basic tradecraft, how to use encryption codes, avoid surveillance, and communicate through dead drops. He learns to hide messages in invisible ink between the lines of innocent tourist postcards. The CIA assigns him the code name Medium, perhaps a reference to his talent for creating fictional narratives that somehow feel believable. Returning to Moscow, Potashov waits 6 months before beginning active operations. He starts receiving encrypted radio transmissions and leaving coded messages in predetermined locations. His handlers believe they have recruited a valuable asset with potential for even greater access as his career progresses. But both sides are about to discover that their new spy is not quite what he appears to be. May 1986. Potashov tells a colleague he needs to work late at the library. He leaves the institute building and initially heads in the expected direction. Then, without warning, he changes course and travels across the city to Stroitley Street. KGB surveillance teams, who have been quietly monitoring several suspects, watch as he approaches a phone booth. His behavior is peculiar. He appears nervous, constantly checking his surroundings. He reaches behind the booth and retrieves something that makes the watchers lean forward in their hidden positions. A dirty glove, filthy, torn, seemingly worthless. No rational person would pick up such an object from the street. Yet Potashov carefully wraps it in a bag and takes it with him. The surveillance team faces a critical decision. If the glove is simply refuse, interfering now could compromise their entire operation. But if it contains intelligence materials disguised as common trash, allowing Potashov to deliver it could mean losing crucial evidence. They let him go and continue watching. Several days later, Potashov repeats the route. This time, observers are certain. The glove is a container for espionage equipment. The Americans often camouflaged their materials as ordinary objects: cigarette packs, pipe fragments, even broken bricks. Potashov has been collecting instructions and equipment from a dead drop hidden in plain sight. The KGB establishes a surveillance post in a building opposite Potashov's apartment. Night after night, they watch him through their lenses as he sits in his kitchen, listening to a transistor radio. The timing is suspicious. His listening sessions coincide precisely with encrypted transmissions broadcast by a CIA radio station operating from West Germany. The signals are intended for Soviet agents, containing instructions and requests for information. After one particular radio session, Potashov walks to a nearby mailbox and deposits a postcard. The message appears to be written by a foreign tourist visiting Moscow, a common cover technique used by intelligence services to conceal espionage communications. When the postcard is intercepted and examined under special lights, investigators discover exactly what they expected: invisible writing between the printed lines. The hidden message contains encrypted intelligence, transmitted using the same handwriting style that had first alerted them to the spy's existence. The web is closing around Agent Medium, but the most surprising revelations are yet to come. July 1st, 1986, 6:30 in the evening, Klebny Lane in Moscow. Vladimir Potashov approaches his parked car, probably thinking about dinner plans or evening radio transmissions. He has no idea that this ordinary moment is about to become his last as a free man. Two men emerge from the shadows. Before Potashov can react, he feels himself lifted off the ground. Trained operatives from the KGB's surveillance team bundle him into a waiting van. Within minutes, he is sitting in handcuffs, staring at the faces of officers who have been watching his every move for months. The subsequent search of his apartment reveals the complete infrastructure of a spy operation. Multiple hiding places under the bathtub, behind furniture, and in storage areas. Inside are cipher pads, bottles of special ink for invisible writing, and pre-written postcards with blank lines where encrypted messages would be inserted. Potashov's wife witnesses the search, becoming so distraught that KGB officers worry she might harm herself. They maintain surveillance of the apartment even after the arrest, concerned about her emotional state. But the most revealing moment comes when surveillance teams intercept a phone call to the apartment. A woman's voice asks to speak with Potashov. When told he has been arrested, she hangs up immediately. The KGB has found not just their spy, but evidence of his network. During interrogation, Potashov begins spinning tales that sound like something from a spy thriller. He claims that FBI agents forcibly recruited him during his American trip, threatening his life if he refused to cooperate. According to his version, 4 large men abducted him, brought him to a safe house, and coerced him into espionage through physical intimidation. The story contains enough realistic elements to be plausible. American intelligence agencies did employ aggressive recruitment tactics, including threats, coercion, and even pharmaceutical manipulation to secure cooperation from potential assets. But Potashov's account contains a crucial claim that puzzles his interrogators. He insists that he agreed to work for the Americans only to gather intelligence about CIA operations in Moscow, which he planned to report to Soviet authorities upon his return. If true, this would make him a double agent working for Soviet interests. If false, it represents an elaborate attempt to minimize his culpability. The KGB officers remain skeptical. They have gathered too much evidence of genuine espionage activity to accept such a convenient explanation. The mystery of the stolen phone directory finally makes sense when investigators piece together Potashov's activities. The directory contained contact information for senior Soviet officials connected to the government's internal communication system. Such intelligence could help foreign services understand the structure and hierarchy of Soviet decision-making. But here's where Potashov's amateur approach becomes apparent. The Americans had no interest in purchasing random phone numbers. The CIA wanted intelligence about military capabilities, negotiation strategies, and policy decisions. A phone book, while potentially useful for understanding bureaucratic structures, held minimal operational value. Potashov had apparently believed he could earn significant money by selling such material. His misunderstanding of what constituted valuable intelligence reveals both his naivety and his desperate desire to prove his worth to his handlers. The theft represents something almost childish in its conception, the act of someone who understood neither the true value of intelligence nor the sophisticated requirements of professional espionage operations. Despite Potashov's limited access to genuinely classified information, the CIA continued their relationship with him. Their reasoning was long-term. The Institute for USA and Canada Studies served as a launching pad for government careers. Researchers from the institute often moved into positions at the Foreign Ministry, trade organizations, or even the Central Committee of the Communist Party. An agent who advanced to such a position could provide access to truly sensitive information about Soviet policy and decision-making. Potashov represented potential rather than immediate value. His current intelligence contributions were modest, mostly information gathered through conversations with colleagues or analysis of publicly available materials. But if his career trajectory continued upward, he could eventually reach positions where his access would justify the investment. The Americans paid him small amounts, nothing approaching the hundreds of thousands of dollars provided to other Soviet assets who transmitted genuine military secrets. His compensation reflected his actual contribution, promising but not yet substantial. The investigation that began with a single intercepted postcard had consumed years of effort and countless man-hours. Now, with Potashov in custody, the KGB could finally assess the scope of his activities and the damage he had caused. The reality proved somewhat anticlimactic. While Potashov had indeed transmitted intelligence to his American handlers, most of it consisted of analysis and commentary rather than classified state secrets. His institute operated without a first department, the KGB structure responsible for maintaining security clearances, precisely because its work dealt primarily with open-source research and analysis. Nevertheless, Soviet law treated any unauthorized communication with foreign intelligence services as treason, regardless of the information's classification level. Potashov faced potential penalties ranging from 10 years imprisonment to capital punishment. The case proceeded through the Soviet legal system with predictable results. In an era when betraying state secrets could result in the ultimate penalty, any lesser sentence might be considered merciful. Over the years, Potashov's case became surrounded by legends that obscured the mundane reality of his espionage activities. American newspapers would later claim he provided crucial intelligence about Soviet space capabilities and the Buran shuttle program. Some stories suggested he received payment of $1 million for his services. Another persistent myth suggests that President Reagan personally intervened to save Potashov from capital punishment during his 1988 Moscow summit with Gorbachev. According to this version, Reagan told the Soviet leader that espionage was war without casualties and requested clemency for the captured spy. The timeline makes this impossible. Reagan's Moscow visit occurred in summer 1988, a full year after Potashov's sentence had been announced. The spy received 13 years imprisonment. Harsh, but not the maximum penalty available under Soviet law. February 7, 1992. Just over a month after the Soviet Union's collapse, Potashov walks free under a general amnesty. He serves only 6 years of his sentence, emerging into a transformed world where the ideological conflict that defined his espionage career no longer exists. He gives interviews to foreign journalists, portraying himself as a victim of Soviet political repression who had always opposed the communist system. He claims that while imprisoned in a Ural labor camp, he sewed a Russian flag as an act of protest against the regime. Later that year, Potashov travels to Poland on what he describes as a tourist trip. In Warsaw, he approaches the American embassy and requests asylum. Within months, he is living in the United States, reportedly working for a software development company and receiving assistance from the American government. Periodically, he reminds the world of his existence through newspaper interviews, describing his experiences as a spy and victim of Soviet oppression. He claims credit for originally proposing the Missile Elimination Treaty that Gorbachev and Reagan signed in December 1987. But what was Vladimir Potashov really? A dedicated double agent working for Soviet interests? A naive academic seduced by American recruitment? Or simply an opportunist who found himself caught between two intelligence services, each believing they were using him while he attempted to use both? The evidence suggests someone far more ordinary than the legends imply. Potashov was neither a master spy nor a political martyr, but rather an ambitious researcher who stumbled into a world he didn't fully understand. His recruitment violated every principle of professional intelligence work. His contributions provided minimal value to his handlers. His capture resulted from basic operational mistakes that any trained operative would have avoided. Yet his case illuminates something profound about the human cost of ideological conflict. In an era when superpowers pointed thousands of nuclear warheads at each other, individuals like Potashov found themselves navigating impossible choices between competing loyalties, personal ambition, and simple survival. The stolen phone directory, the detail that seems most absurd in retrospect, perhaps reveals the most about his character. Here was someone intelligent enough to recognize opportunity, naive enough to misunderstand its value, and desperate enough to risk everything for what turned out to be almost nothing. In the end, Agent Medium succeeded primarily in demonstrating that reality is often far more complex and far more human than the legends we create to explain it. Decades later, questions remain. Did Potashov genuinely believe he was serving some higher purpose, or was he simply motivated by personal gain? How much valuable intelligence actually changed hands during his years of operation? And what happened to the other Soviet citizens who may have been compromised by his activities? The answers died with the Soviet Union itself, buried in archives that may never be fully opened. What survives is the story of one man's attempt to play a game he never fully understood, in a conflict where the stakes were measured in the survival of civilization itself. Perhaps that's the most unsettling truth of all, that history can turn on the actions of individuals who have no real understanding of the forces they're attempting to manipulate. In the shadowy world of Cold War espionage, the most dangerous operatives might not be the master spies of popular imagination, but ordinary people who convince themselves they're playing for higher stakes than they actually comprehend.